Good morning, vinyl community. Bradley here, back for another classic jazz album review. I'm not sure what number this is, but I'm taking two albums on each review. At least one of them will be a classic, probably a classic jazz album, and the second one, maybe it's not a classic, but it's very good. So anyhow, the first album is an organist, jazz blues. It is Jimmy Smith, Back at the Chicken Shack by the incredible Jimmy Smith. A great Blue Note cover. I love that. This is on Blue Note, of course. Now this particular album, it was recorded on April 25th, 1960, but it was not released until 2 years later, more than 2 years later, in 1963. Now this album, Back at the Chicken Shack, was recorded during the same session that Midnight Special was recorded. So there are similarities between these two albums, and I am pretty sure if they were at the same session, I'm sure they have the same people. Jimmy Smith, of course, is on organ, which means he plays the bass also. Stanley Turrentine is on tenor sax. Kenny Burrell, great jazz guitarist, which he was on scads of Jimmy Smith albums. And Donald Bailey on drums. So a very good group. Now this has 4 songs. This particular album is a 75th anniversary Blue Note reissue. It's got the original 4 songs on there. Now I also do have the CD of this, and which contains an extra bonus track, which is Sunny Side of the Street, the old classic. And it's very, very good. So, a little history behind Jimmy Smith, I'll tell you briefly. He's from Philadelphia. I think he grew up playing piano. During the mid-50s, he heard Wild Bill Davis, a jazz organist, and he fell in love with the sound of the Hammond organ. So, I'm not sure what year it was, probably 55 or so. He bought a Hammond B3 organ, and he rented a warehouse for a year. Now this is the legend. I assume it's true. I've read this story several times. So anyhow, he rented a warehouse for a year, and he perfected his style of playing the B3 organ. So anyhow, he had started playing in Philadelphia clubs, and the owner of Blue Note, Alfred Lyon, heard him and pretty much immediately signed him to Blue Note. And I think he was with Blue Note for probably 8 years or so. But during those 8 years, he released, I think it was 40 albums on Blue Note. And I think that was all under his own name. So we're talking about 5 albums a year. I mean, just prolific recorder. And like I said, this Back of the Chicken Shack, this was released in 1963. And by that time, Jimmy Smith had signed with Verve Records. So I don't know if they released this right before he switched, or maybe they released it right after he signed with Verve. So that's kind of interesting. Now on this, well, I'll tell you a little bit about, since Jimmy played the jazz organ, his songs were very popular, even on the, I guess you'd call them pop charts or whatever. And there was like a boom in people buying organs for their houses, for their homes. And I think Jimmy Smith was a part of that. And that boom went on for, whatever, 15, 20 years, you know. There's a lot of households had organs. Not necessarily Hammonds, but, you know. Now this, I love this cover art. Supposedly, Alfred Lyon and the other co-owner of Blue Note, Francis Wolff, the photographer that took all these pictures, and Jimmy Smith took a little car trip from New York down to Jimmy's hometown of Philadelphia, and they were looking for a place to shoot the cover photograph. So they got around Philadelphia, and Jimmy had a friend who had a farm. So he said, well, let's go there and see if we can get a picture there. So this was taken on Jimmy's friend's farm. And on the back of the album, on the liner notes, the dog's name is Elsie. The rooster, I don't know what his name was. But just another iconic Blue Note cover. So like I said, on this album, there are 4 songs. Back of the Chicken Shack is the title song. Excellent. When I Grow Too Old to Dream by Oscar Hammerstein. Now the third song, which this is going to kind of relate to the second album I will be showing, is called Minor Chant, which was written by Stanley Turrentine, the saxophonist on this album. Now, this song, Minor Chant, was also on Stanley's album called, which I will show that, well, I'll show it right now. Look Out. So I'm not sure exactly. I'm thinking the first version was for the Jimmy Smith album. And then Stanley did his Lookout album, and he did his own version of his own song on that. So I'm not really sure. As far as rating this record, 5 stars. Everybody's got to have a Jimmy Smith album or 2, you know, as an organist. Cover art, another 5. So I love Jimmy Smith. I will buy out anything by him. Okay, now the other album, which I showed you briefly, is Stanley Turrentine, Look Out. This was on Blue Note, recorded June 18th, 1960, and released in November. The players on this album are Stanley Turrentine on tenor sax, Horace Parlin on piano, who he recorded for Blue Note, George Tucker on bass, Al Harwood on drums, and it was recorded at the Rudy Van Gelder Studios. Now this particular issue of this album, it's not a true Blue Note. It's called Vinyl Passion, I believe is the record label. Probably Eastern European. Probably ripped from a CD, I suppose. It sounds good. It sounds really good. I try to avoid those kind of pressings. I want the Blue Note label, and but the sound quality is very good on this. And I did not want to spend the extra, or the $90 that this album goes for, like on Music Matters or something. It's a good album, but it's not that good. Actually, it is a good album. It's hard bop. Kind of a nice, easy listen. Nothing's gonna come out and bite you. You know, it's very good though. And briefly, just a short description of Stanley. He had an older brother, Tommy Turrentine, which played trumpet. And actually, this album here has a couple bonus tracks, which Tommy does play on. Anyhow, he was from Pittsburgh. I think he started out in whatever, bebop, bop, hard bop. He migrated to jazz, soul jazz, and even jazz fusion. And I believe in 1960, probably around when this album was recorded, he married the jazz organist Shirley Scott, which he and Shirley, his wife, made several albums during the 60s. I'm not sure if they were, well, I know some of them were for Blue Note. You know, this is not a classic, but it's very good. As far as rating, I'll give it a very solid 4 stars. And this album cover, whatever, 3.5. You know, not, and I'm not sure if this is the same cover art as on the Blue Note album. I think not, but I may be wrong. So anyhow, that's my little jazz review for today. I hope you've enjoyed this. So have a good day. I'll see you later.